Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody that everybody's dead.
Welcome to episode 11 of the Cult of Dangerous ASMR podcast. My name is Steven, and everybody knows my co-host.
Boggle. Hi, guys.
Hello, what the hell is that chirping in the background?
Oh, yeah, I'm recording outside just because I'm currently living in an apartment full of people and I don't think they want to hear this bullshit podcast. So I'm currently pacing the parking lot of this apartment, 11 at night, no shoes, and the crickets are really loud. So they are going to be our third co-host, the crickets. You know, Dangerous has to deal with birds and planes. I got to deal with crickets. So that's kind of our fault for starting so late. And by ours, I mean, like, literally both of us were busy. We were supposed to start this evening, and then both of us repeatedly got busy. But now we're finally at it. Anyways, moving on to the actual podcast.
I already regret this.
Me too. Let's keep going.
Alright. So on today's docket, we, like always, are going to be reviewing the two new Dangerous audios. The newest episode of Witch's Experiment, and a surprise upload to a series that we thought was finished forever. And of course, after that, we will talk about my favorite Dangerous ASMR series. It's tied with Jekyll and Hyde. It's complicated. We'll get into it, but all you need to know is I love this series so much. So before we get started on that, we need Boggle to do her thing and pimp out all of Dangerous's shit.
So you guys all know the drill. Her first and foremost is her YouTube channel, and then after that is her Patreon, where you can support her for very cheap fees per month, and you can get everything that's on YouTube, plus erotic stuff and just bonus stuff. And then you've also got her Discord, where Steven and I are, and a bunch of other fans, and even Dangerous herself will join, so I definitely advise you to join the Discord. If not for us, for her. Though, to be honest, I'm pretty sure all of our viewers are already from the Discord, so there's really no point in pimping the Discord, because, like, the only people who watch are from the Discord. Anyways, she also has a Twitter where it basically serves as another alert system, so to speak, where at most she usually just tweets out every time a new video hits YouTube. But still worth a follow, you know, why not? And then her most recent thing is the Redbubble, where she is selling merch. I've gotten a few shirts, and they're cool, so check that out too if you haven't already.
First up for our reviews of the newer Dangerous audios, we have The Witch's Experiment Part 3, which I just had to listen to all 3 episodes in bulk. And we're going to keep this one kind of short just because, nice update, we will be having the writer on after we finish these crossover episodes, so we don't want to, like, basically get out, like, all of our opinions, and he comes on and it's like, well, we already told you guys what we felt, so here's SF just talking by himself, I guess. But yeah, this was my first foray into, God, English is hard, into the series, and I didn't know what to expect. SF, or Squishy as he's known in the Discord, is around quite often, actually, and so basically whenever a new episode comes out, people are, like, always, like, talking about it and stuff. And I have to admit, like, I really did enjoy the series. I really didn't know, like, what it was going to be about, other than obviously there's a witch and then there's a werewolf named Vivian, apparently, which is a funny kind of running joke because there's a mod on the Dangerous server named Vivian, and even though he, like, made the script beforehand, it's still, like, just kind of funny that there's a Dangerous character named Vivian. What do you think about the series, Boggle?
Also enjoy it, because I remember when the first episode hit YouTube, I was like, oh, what is this? And I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first, because I was like, oh, another witch, really? But because, I mean, we already have so many repeats of so many other characters that I was like, okay, and now we're finally reaching another round of witches. But I was intrigued by the premise immediately. This witch who has basically a pet werewolf who has taken an interest in you, and now you're going to start turning, and she wants to study that transformation. I was like, okay, that's a very intriguing plot for sure. And then the second episode where, you know, you're now officially in the process of transformation, you just get to see deeper into how sadistic and cruel this witch is. I was like, man, like, I get it that she doesn't like us and she doesn't care about us, but God, is she mean. But it was still kind of interesting because I'm like, I don't know what the quote-unquote rules are for werewolves in this universe. But at least in this case, they make it sound like, you know, in this may actually be an outlier even within the universe, but that in this case, once you turn, it's permanent. Whereas usually what people we're used to is like the ones who only turn at a full moon, or the ones who can go back and forth. But this one sounds like a one-way
Well,
ticket.
she said she's
And I was
not
intrigued by
sure
that.
because
Well,
I
okay,
think
now she
both
says she's
exist.
not sure, but
I think both exists in that universe.
well, I was gonna say that was back in episode 2, but yes, in the most recent episode, it is clarified a little bit because even though, you know, she's still a jerk to you and Viv, and you're still in agony as you slowly transform, there's a brief scene where she does offer some backstory and does hint that originally it was supposed to be your traditional once a month thing, but because the transformations were so painful, her solution was to just turn Viv into a wolf full time. But then she argues, oh, hey, by the way, and the plus side is, even though Viv is a wolf, she, for the most part, has the mind of a human. So that's why, even though she will go on rampages, she is able to understand the witch and obey her commands. So it was definitely an interesting thing to hear this new side to the rules of being a werewolf, and also just to hear the backstory of the witch, because even though she's still very cruel and disdainful, this implication that she did sort of have a heart, at least for Vivian, was like interesting, because now I want to see more about how exactly their story went down. Because again, obviously now the witch sees Viv as one would see an annoying but lovable pet, where yeah, the witch even is kind of disdainful of Viv and rude to her, but keeps her around and seems to treat her well enough. Because even when she captures you, the listener, every time you try to cause trouble, she'll sometimes pull a card and be like, hey, don't do this or it's going to upset Viv, and you don't want to upset Viv. And I'm like, why do you care so much about how Viv feels? Because you treat her terribly. But then in episode 3, this one with the bit of backstory, it's implied that maybe they were friends at one point, because the witch outright says, yeah, I did this because it sucked having to watch Viv go through such painful transformations, so I figured this would be easier because now at least she doesn't go back and forth anymore. And it's like, still not exactly the best solution, and she's still hardly a good person, but it was intriguing to hear. And then there was a twist at the end that everyone who's listened to it knows, but I'm like, oh my god, this just keeps getting more and more interesting.
Going back to something,
because now we got to see where the listener fits into this story, on top of how Viv and the witch met, on top of how their relationship with the listener is going to change, and you know, it's all kind of interesting.
and kind of
Okay, I'm done.
And kind of going back to something you brought up earlier, how like it seems like, oh, we're doing like another round of the witch. It is kind of ironic that this came out the same week that we did our witch retrospective series. Like I said, this podcast has a lot of power. Who knows? We might even get the next crossover episode next week because we're reviewing the crossover series next week. But there does seem to be a case of like a lot of people like writing multiple versions of every monster. Like this is technically our 4th werewolf, or technically this is our 3rd because Yandere Werewolf came after, and then we have like a bunch of Lamias, several vampires, multiple Yanderes. So it does kind of get repetitive to have like so many versions of the creatures, but SF like really like he made this one so different from the werewolves we've had and the previous witch we had, because this witch is like totally the opposite of it. Because other than like maybe her having a heart for Viv, there's like very few redeeming things about this. While the Yandere witch, you can tell she's done like a lot of like not so great things to like, you know, survive, but you can tell like at her heart she's like not a bad person. So it's nice to have like 2 witches that are just completely different. So you don't not like, oh, another witch again. But I really am liking this series so far, especially if what happens at the end. Like I went from like just kind of casually listening to like, wait, what? Oh my gosh! Like I need episode 4 now. Next up, we have a surprise, but a very pleasant surprise. So after a few weeks ago praising the story and talking about how like, yes, we finally had a Dangerous ASMR series have an ending, they make another episode. This one is referred to as the epilogue, which presumably means this will be the last episode. And with how it ends, like I'd very much be happy if this one was ends up being the
But
last
we'll
one.
see if we don't get an epilogue part 2, because Steven did make that joke in the Discord that even though they claimed that the last part was the grand finale, we still got an epilogue. So we're probably going to, with the power of this podcast, hopefully get an episode 9. And yes, hopefully a crossover. And maybe we can just start bringing in all of our favorite incomplete series And by the fate of whatever god may or may not exist, that's going to wind up happening. Because, I mean, hey, like Steven said, that series is supposed to be over, but we still got another episode. So literally, this podcast is magic.
So did joke that like it would be funny if FN like after like it's like all right guys, one more episode. You're like, dude, you gave us like 5 endings. It's like, well, no, this one's different. It's a prequel, and it's literally just sounds of an airplane, and then that eventually goes through a wormhole and then crashes. It's like, well, okay, that was kind of depressing, but would also take some really big balls. So maybe do it, FN.
Hint, hint, FN. Just kidding. I don't even know if he listens to this.
I doubt it. Yeah. I even joked that like, screw it. I will write my own fan fiction prequel audio of just me as the listener just being like, man, I'm so lonely. Man, I really like tall women. Oh, I'm gonna get on this plane. Oh no, the plane crashed. What the heck? Who are you? And then it just ends with like them saying, hello, human. Aspirations.
That would honestly be cool.
I probably won't do it.
Oh, yeah, same, honestly. It's all about having... The mark of a true writer is coming up with 1 million awesome ideas and writing down 0 of them. So yeah, epic ideas for prequels that we know will never happen.
Anyways, we should actually talk about the episode.
Probably.
So I actually found this very sweet and like very nice. My thing with like episode 7, funnily enough, was like I feel like it just ended kind of abruptly. Like it did have closure. Like the human is like, hey, I'm gonna stay with you two. Freya finally admitted that she loved the listener. So there was pretty much like all you wanted, but it always felt like there was kind of more to the story. And so I am glad that he made this. Even though I feel like that this was basically an entire season of like another season of Saved by the Giantesses crammed into like one episode, because it's like, oh no, Astrid's sick. Oh no, this thing. Oh no, this thing. Oh, now we're becoming a wizard apparently.
Oh yeah, I will say that was probably the part that stuck out to me most. I was like, wait, how big was the time skip? Because it goes from us meeting the witch to her having apparently taught us an entire spell. And not only did she have to teach us the spell, but we had to gain her trust in the first place. And I'm like, how? That was a major time skip, bro.
To be fair, she is a court wizard, which another dangerous character. Which, as me and Boggle were talking about beforehand, it's just dangerous doing like whatever like weird accent, probably because she's like, I don't know what other voice to do for this character. Accent. And so my only justification of it is that if I always assume that court wizards are decent leveled wizards. So yeah, man, it's probably like a level 2 spell that she taught the listener. So
Okay, fair point.
But I do find it kind of funny because the spell doesn't work in the way you think it does, but it's still like so spoilers, just skip ahead like 20 seconds. So as you guys know who have listened to it, the spell basically makes them go from an undetermined amount of height to 14 feet, which
Got a confirmed
yeah,
height.
which is kind of funny because FN did say it's like, well, they're more than 15. It's like, oh, foreshadowing. I really like to think it's like, well, I know they're not 14 because I'm gonna make them 14 in the end. So I mean that is like kind of cute. That is like a more manageable, like even as like Freya kind of says, like now I can kiss you properly, which is like that's so cute. Like I actually like. I wouldn't mind. I don't whether Dangerous writes this or FN writes this. I honestly wouldn't mind Cuddled with Freya's episode because I think everyone loves Freya, and I think it would be really sweet to like have them have like another like kind of like just cuddling based audio. Like I know there's episodes where like a big part of it is you're cuddling with one of the sisters, but like I wouldn't mind something in the vein of like Cuddle with the Neko or the Countess or Alpha. But yeah, it's it's a pretty crazy epilogue.
Honestly, I felt the same way. Like, on top of just being surprised and amused at seeing it come out and being like, oh, he just one last hurrah. It was very cute, and it was nice to see the two again. And also, like, again, with just me being big dumb, I honestly sometimes would get the sisters mixed up. And I do feel like even though it's supposed to be sisters, plural, for the most part, Freya is the more talked about character. So to see an episode that, at least for the beginning half, was more focused on hanging with Astrid, I kind of approved. I was like, hey, there we go. I like that.
Yeah, I agree with
But
that.
that aside, yes, oh, what? Oh, yeah, because actually, guys, totally unimportant, but last time we talked about this series, we jokingly asked each other our favorite giantess, and I'm pretty sure basically everyone answered Freya. I honestly think I'm going to pick Astrid, not just because I'm trying to be, like, a different person or, like, rebel and be like, well, you all pick Freya, I'll go pick Astrid, but just because, like, she's more playful, and I find it amusing. Like, I don't know, I guess I prefer, like, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I think just as lovely and sweet as Freya is, I really like Astrid's like spunk and prankness that I think is definitely evident in this last episode. And I'm like, there we go. Astrid's a lot of fun. But that aside, yeah, just seeing kind of how it gets, because yes, the last episode did have closure because the listener said, "I will stay with you." But this one giving the extra closure of, oh, here's how the romance is gonna work. This is how we're gonna make it fit. And I was like, I'm glad that we got that type of closure. And I feel like that's the only reason the episode was made. But it was still really cute to see the kind of justification for how we're going to be able to get together with Freya. And yeah, just to hang with them again and see how things are going. Because, I mean, in my opinion, there are still questions unanswered. Like, the entire, like, where did the plane... Well, we know where the plane came from. It came from our planet. But, like, where did it go and how did it get there? That's, like, a huge plot hole that was kind of never really addressed after the episode where it was first brought up as a giant plot twist. But I have a feeling that we're not going to get that question answered. So
I would be kind of happy if this is the last one. Like, for you Patreon users, I don't even really need a not safe for work episode. I am like good with just like this being the end. That being said, if another one comes out, like I'll still listen to it. I'll probably still love it because I love the series. But I feel like this is like a really good way to end this. Now on to the main event of today's episode. We are talking about Prisoner of Yandere Werewolf, which all those adjectives completely change after like 3 episodes. Because you're not really a prisoner, and she's not really Yandere after like episode 2, maybe. It's kind of weird. What's kind of weird about this is you had a character that completely changes seemingly from like the beginning of conception. Just because from what Dangerous has said, just the way she was writing Alpha tended to lean more to Tsundere after a while, and so she kind of just went with it. But like, unlike the Witch series, which has like a different like adjective like almost every episode, this one just kept going. The Prisoner subtitle, not subtitle, but you know what I mean, guys. But yeah, I probably want to get a little bit more into character by the end. I kind of just want to talk about like what we like about it at first. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you go, Boggle, because I'm probably gonna go on a longer thing than you.
yeah, this is Steven's episode. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna give my piece and then leave.
Please don't do that.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, yeah. Funnily enough, and I might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but this was the very first Dangerous series I ever listened to. Because way back last year, when she was just starting out and I was still like trying to understand why people liked ASMR roleplay so much, I happened to stumble upon her Yandere Werewolf series. And I was like, objectively, this is very good. Like, the voice and the sound effects, fine. But back then I didn't really like it because it just felt weird to me because ASMR roleplays were not my thing. But then, like, fast forward a year later and I rediscovered it, and I was like, oh my god, I remember this. So it's kind of funny to me. Yeah, this one also holds like a kind of special place in my heart solely because it was my very first Dangerous experience. But yes, even that aside, I think it was a very cute series because even though it does start off with the stereotypical Yandere thinking that she needs to protect you from the outside world and only she can do it and only she's worthy of you, you know, the usual. Yeah, she does switch into becoming a much sweeter character. And I think that's the strong appeal to her is like, as, you know, as dangerous as this fandom may be, everybody loves their sweetness and cuddles. And the werewolf definitely fulfills this because she's just a very sweet, curious, innocent personality, which obviously attracted a lot of people, especially in comparison to like the more somber witch or the more aggressive countess. To have somebody as light as the werewolf was like a stark contrast that I think drew a lot of people in. But even aside from the fascination with the adorableness of the character, even though the plot itself was another like fairly simplistic one, just getting used to life as part of the wolf pack, it was still enjoyable to see their antics and kind of how the listener adjusts to this new life in the wild, and how the listener and the werewolf kind of go from, you know, captor and captive to friends to possibly something else. Because even Dangerous herself said part of the reason she really loves Alpha so much is because Alpha has this kind of character growth that, at least at the time, none of the other characters had. And we can see that with the way the relationship between her and us changes. And I think that's another big appeal across the fandom, is to see her softening up and learning to genuinely care for us and respect us, rather than just see us as a little pet that she has to take care of. And like a weird reverse adoption where instead of the human coming home with the dog, it's the dog coming home with the human. Hey, I found this and I think I need to look after it. Can we keep it? But yes, it was a very well done series. And just very adorable and just really beautiful to watch kind of bloom. And of course it ties into the crossover, which everyone was hyped for already. But yeah, I'll let Steven go on his. I'm sure he's been waiting a long time. But yeah, brace yourselves, because his is the only voice you're going to hear for the rest of this episode.
So I agree with what Boggle's saying. My experience with this one is basically I was already a fan of Dangerous at this point, and I was just kind of looking for more series to go back and listen to. But this is definitely the first crossover series I listened to. I don't know like why I even picked this one. Like I guess it's because I like werewolves. Like I'm not the biggest Yandere person, which like was definitely a surprise for me when this series kind of changed. And what's funny is I personally don't even like the first episode all that much. It's just very like blah. It's very like standard. Like, oh well, I'm gonna take you. It doesn't have like the cool factor. Like I think out of the like all the pilots for the crossover series episodes, I think the witch one's definitely the best. This one's like kind of just blah. And then the next one came where your baby knew fur, and that one got me way more intrigued. And just at like that's where she really starts. Alpha really starts becoming like the character she will become. 'Cause Alpha's kind of ditzy, honestly. She's not familiar with like the human ways, so just the concept of a human getting embarrassed while she's naked is just completely foreign to her. And that is one of the many things I love about her, is just normal human customs are just like not something she ever thinks about, and just kind of confuse her. But anyways, I basically spent a whole day like doing like various like food deliveries, listening to the series. I listened to it in essentially not one sitting, but throughout a whole day. And I was not having a good day either, so like a combination of that, this series like really like got to me. And by the end of it, I was just hoping that she would say those three words. I am getting a little bit ahead of myself right now, but yeah, I've been a big fan of the series ever since then. It is mainly because of Alpha. I think she's a great character, and she's one of the few Dangerous characters to have like a complete arc. Most Dangerous characters don't have arcs because they're around for like one shots, or they don't have as many episodes. Like even like Jekyll and Hyde, like Angela's learned her lesson in like episode 3, and she kind of regressed, and really only like now are like Angela and Lola like kind of getting some like character turning arcs right now. But Alpha has it was like a steady progression. Like every episode she seemed to be like becoming like a different character. And another thing that I really have to give this series is it has one of the best listeners. I know that's weird to say, but this listener is like one of the most active out of like any of them. Because not only is he actively like teaching her like teaching her his ways kind of inadvertently, because he's a dude. Not only are they kind of like teaching their ways inadvertently because they're just like a normal squishy human, or with their soft useless bodies, but they can't hunt the same way as the wolves can, and she's basically taken you, as Boggle said, a pet inside this pack. And you can't run as fast as them, you can't hunt as fast as them, so you're basically with her like learning, showing her ways of how humans hunt, and she kind of finds it fascinating at first in a very like, wow, this seems very useless and dumb type of way, but as like it kind of progresses and as you talk to her, she kind of sees like the benefits of like how humans think and stuff like that. And not only that, but the listener actually fights with her at one point, which is another thing which kind of like helps like the shipping feel of the listener and her.
And I like characters who fight back.
So yeah, not only do they be like a smartass back to her sometimes, but like they're using a spear to like fight off monsters of her and stuff. So this is even if you want to like be if you want to be more than a piece of meat, which I feel like a lot of like times when you're the listener, you are just literally a captured piece of meat to kind of just deal with the wrath of whatever character Dangerous plays. If you want to like do more in the story, this is definitely like a good story to kind of like get to.
I feel bad that I didn't mention this, but yes, what Steven said about the listener being really awesome. To me, it's not even just the fighting, but that's like one of my favorite things about this series was the heavy message of learning from each other. Because on an individual level, it's just cute to see people wanting to learn about each other because they're in love or they're friends. Like, I think that's solid life advice, solid relationship advice, is to be curious about one another and wish to learn from one another and with one another and grow together. Like, that's just good life advice. But then on a larger scale, the kind of quote unquote symbolic nature of the werewolf saying to the human, teach me your ways because I think they could be beneficial to me, and let me teach you my ways because I think they could be beneficial to you, is like, even though it's only between the listener and the alpha, it's like a weird kind of sense of a peace treaty almost between humans and wolves, because humans in fantasy stories never like non-human creatures. So the village is implied to be very against werewolves, vampires, etc., and sometimes for good reason. Because the wolf even says, yeah, humans don't like us and we don't like humans. So then for the wolf to kind of start to see the power that a human can have and be like, no, you've kind of impressed me. I'd like to know what your techniques are because maybe they could help my pack, and I'd like to help you, and I'll teach you my ways. That kind of alliance and mutual exchange of knowledge is like, on a larger scale, this idea of peace between differing groups. And again, you see shades of that in the witch and vampire series as well, where both the countess and the witch are like, yeah, humans hate us, so we try to avoid them. So then to see in this particular case, once where the listener and their magical captor kind of start to get along, and the captor says, hey, you're kind of cool, we should learn from one another and learn together and grow together. It's like, this is so cool. Because we don't quite see that in the other two series for obvious plot related reasons. But yeah, I love that aspect about the series, is the heavy focus placed on that concept of learning to, with, and from one another. I'm just like, that's good stuff on so many levels. Yeah. Okay, now I'm done.
Before we kind of get into spoiler territory, I do want to say that the cuddling with the Tsundere Werewolf, which is the first time she's officially called the Tsundere Werewolf. Although, as you guys see, I call her Alpha just because, I mean, technically that's her name. She does refer to herself. She never says the Alpha. She always says, I'm Alpha, which is obviously a title, but it's fun just to basically make that her canon name. Which is the entire reason why I made this podcast, to make sure that that is the canon name of her, is Alpha. So, yeah, that's the canon name until Dangerous tells me otherwise. And if she tells me otherwise, I will be sad. Anyways, tangent.
We've said before, the only reason this podcast exists is so Steven can constantly remind us that he wants the Yandere but really Tsundere Werewolf to be called Alpha, and he's going to keep reminding us until that becomes canon. And then when Dangerous finally calls her Alpha for real and basically accepts that name as canon, we're ending this podcast.
Yeah. So the cuddling with the Alpha episode is probably my favorite Dangerous audio. I actually don't listen to it a whole lot, just so I kind of don't lose the impact it has. I've probably only listened to it all the way through like once. It's one of the audios that I use to go to sleep sometimes. Yeah, it's so usually what happens is I'll listen to it and kind of take a nap to it, and then I usually get consciousness in the last few seconds of it. To me, it perfectly encapsulates her character and the kind of the relationship they have. In multiple senses of her treating you as a pack member and as possible love interests. It also showcases her personality the best way, because she's bragging about how because she's the alpha, she's not going to get sleepy like you will get. as she's clearly fallen asleep and barely conscious. It is very cute, and it's very heartwarming for me to listen to it, and it makes me happy every time I do. But now we will be kind of going into more spoiler territory. This is a great series. It's probably not as like actiony as the Witch series is, even though the listener, like I said, like takes more of like an active role in this. But I definitely 100% recommend the series. All right, now on to spoilers, where I will just probably talk for the next like 5 minutes about why I love this character so much. So, as we kind of like been saying, Alpha goes through a character arc. At first, she basically starts the standard Yandere. Oh, I like you. You're mine. Let's go over there where we can live forever. And she basically inducts you as a pet, or as a mascot, the human mascot of like her pack. But as the episodes go on, she changes to the point to where even like Dangerous changes her voice and her way of speaking. To the point to like where you can tell she doesn't really talk all that much, like just to you. So she doesn't like use words like the or a and stuff like that. And even like her Tsundere traits kind of more lend themselves to like the classic Tsundere archetype. Like not the oh, I hate you so much because I secretly love you. More of just as I kind of like to say, like they have like a hard like candy shell, but when you kind of like start breaking through that, you get like that sweet QE in the middle. Wow, it sounds really stupid now I'm saying it out loud, but that is how she basically is. She has this very like tough interior, but she is very sweet deep down, and she also has a hilarious personality because she's super condescending. I was listening to the series again, and she is like so mean accidentally. Like she's constantly like saying, "Hey, this is stupid. Hey, this is boring." But I fucking love it so much. Like, I complain like people being mean to me, but it's not that she's being mean, it's that she just doesn't know how to interact with people. And to her, like, yeah, if something's boring or stupid, I'm the alpha. I'm gonna tell you it's boring and stupid, not even caring about your feelings. Um, so yeah, I love her spunky attitude. I love her way of speaking. Um, and I love her character arc because she brings you into the pack, quotation marks, to protect you. And then as it progresses, she realizes that you are a vital member of the pack. You are not just some human. There's more to you than that. And then there's a great moment where the listener just straight up kisses her. And you can tell it's when her feelings start getting conflicted because she sees you with this human. And she's like, I can't be with a human, I'm a wolf. But as it progresses, you can clearly like see the love between the two. And then that finally leads to like episode 12, which it's funny actually because I'm not listening to the crossover episodes till next week. I actually skipped episode 11. But in episode 12, she finally says those three little words, I love you. And to sound like a complete nerd, I have gone back to that specific part of the episode and just replayed her saying I love you multiple times because I am pathetic. Boggle, please take over so I can stop being embarrassed.
Yeah, so in case you guys missed that, Steven listens to that one specific part in the episode where she confesses her love to you because he's a sad, lonely, pathetic boy who's got nothing else going for him. So he just listens to it on loop to satisfy the hole in his heart that will never be filled by anybody in real life because nobody can ever love him. I'm just kidding. You asked me to take over, but you never said I had to make it better. So I'm just going to reiterate what you said to make it even worse because I'm going to remind everyone 2 seconds after you said it that you just listened to that love confession because you're that much
Moving on.
But it's
Moving
okay.
on. What do you think of this series with spoilers attached?
I do think it's very cute because I had to say, like, it's interesting to. There's so many cars. It is almost midnight, and there's so many cars. I get it. I live in a city, but Jesus Christ. Anyways, in all seriousness, I do find it to be a very cute series just because Alpha is so adorable. And kind of what Steven was saying earlier, like I love her social awkwardness where due to a mixture of factors, she does speak in sometimes very blunt ways that to a normal person would be considered rude, but to her it's just simple fact. And not only that, but like also Steven mentioned earlier, yeah, when you guys go bathing in the springs together, you literally walk in and are naked, and of course you are a little bit embarrassed, but she doesn't understand why you'd be embarrassed about walking in on a naked female. And I'm like, I love that trope in anything when you've got a character who doesn't understand cultural norms and does stuff like that. It's just the cutest, funniest thing ever. And a mixture of that, yeah, the satisfyingness of getting a proper love confession. Because even though obviously, you know that a lot of these other characters secretly love you as well, but have it actually said out loud and properly and not in like some passive aggressive, well, I just don't want anything to happen to you. Was like, oh my God, she actually said those 3 little words. Like, there we go. It's in some ways almost boring because that's all it is. But it's like, okay, she said it though. Like, it wasn't something masked or hidden or passive aggressive. Like, she said it. I was like, there we go. Because I'm pretty sure that's one of the few, and maybe the only where like a character who starts out as Yandere and or Tsundere says it genuinely. Because like for example, we know the Countess kind of cares for us too, but she's never said I love you. All she ever does is I care about you and I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. It's like, okay, that's pretty much your equivalent of saying I love you, but it's still not quite on par. So to have the werewolf say it's like, there we go, we got one character who said it. Because the difference with the witch is like, she didn't have that Tsundere vibe to her. She liked you immediately. So she was saying I love you out the gate. And even if it's debatable how much she actually loved you, she gave you love confessions like every episode. So to me, yeah, the werewolf one was like really satisfying and adorable. Because I mean, same hopeless romantic where maybe not necessarily with this series, but yeah, there'll be moments in other series and episodes where I'll like be so satisfied with a certain portion of it that I will loop it. So I do it too. So it's okay. I'm allowed to make fun of Steven because I am equally, if not more, pathetic. So I'm probably more pathetic.
And kind of going what you're saying with the loving confession. Yeah, I mean, like it kind of like you're saying, it's kind of like, yeah, well, this is boring. She just said I love you, and then whatever. I guess. But what I love about it is it comes after she's basically spending the whole episode basically saying that because she loves you, she's ready to let you go.
Yes, that's what I love too. It's the first time we've ever been fairly and honorably released by a captor.
Yeah, because she's basically realized, as far as I can tell, it's from basically dealing with the Countess that she's like, ugh, keeping pets. Yeah. That's not a good thing. It's pretty terrible to kidnap people and say that you basically own them. And so, like, basically a whole episode, she's trying to like tell you, like, hey, like, there's the human village. You can go there, because it's not right what I did. Obviously, I don't want you to go, but if you have to go, you must go. And that's basically when she says, "I love you," because I can't remember the line verbatim, but she basically says, like, if I love you, like, keeping you like this is with you not having a choice isn't love. And it's it's really sweet that the confession comes after her kind of completing her arc of realizing that like her ways aren't the correct ways, and even though she is the boss, she has to take like other people's kind of just to take other people into account of the things that she does.
Yeah, the lessons that are in this series are honestly phenomenal because it was like, yeah, like the one that Steven just said, if you truly love someone, you'll listen to them or you won't hold them hostage. But then the other one, like I was saying earlier, with that one of the big things about any relationship is the ability to be curious about one another and want to learn, have a mutual exchange. Like, there's a lot of good messages in this one, honestly, and it's really awesome. And one slight thing I forgot to mention again, like, another thing I like, because I did basically cover this, but yeah, because she's been a werewolf all her life, she doesn't quite understand human customs, so she is confused about clothing. But, like, anytime the character will use an expression she will not understand, for example, you are implied to say, keep your eyes peeled, and she's like, peel your eyes? Or another one where you offer to go with her to that dead place, and she's like, well, fine, but just so I can keep you on my eye. And then you're implied to correct her, actually, it's keep my eyes on you, because then she's like, man, you and your, getting worked up about a little bit of words. So other stuff like that, it's just, I love that kind of comedy, so to have that there was like, bonus.
My favorite interactions between them was when she's like saying like, you're a good listener, and so am I. And the listener's probably like, you're not. And she's like, I am. And then growls at him. It's so cute.
And also, like, because this happens in a lot of audios just by nature of how they work. But anytime the character accuses us of being chatty, because like we literally cannot speak, and not only that, or when she's like, "Well, I don't like talking," I'm like, "Well, realize that for the past 8 episodes, your voice is the only one that's been heard." But again, like by the nature of ASMR, that's going to happen. I love episodes like that where they accuse you of being chatty or they complain that they don't like talking. It's like that's literally all you've done for 8 episodes.
I like the implication that we keep interrupting her, too. Like she's trying to say things and then we're talking and she's like, "Stop like moving your mouth."
Because I will say this, yeah, the banter between them is great, even though you can only hear her side. Because I think there's another part where basically the same thing, where she's like, "The only muscles you work are the ones in your jaw," and I'm like, "Oh, burn!" Like that was actually good. A lot of great lines in this series.
I feel like I've gone on and on about how much I love this character. Do you have any final words?
I feel like I've said everything. I've talked about how adorable it is. I've talked about how funny it is. We've talked about the plot and the character and all the little intricacies that you're pointing out. Where yeah, because I was gonna say like you don't necessarily have to keep this in the podcast, but this is just something I wanted to say. The character is just so sweet. Even back when she first takes you hostage, because it kind of comes from this like noble belief of, oh, you're in danger and I must protect you. Because I know all Yandere's pull that like the outside world is dangerous and I'm the only one who can save you.
But you actually
But I feel like
believe
with
that
her, it
she
was more of a
believes that.
wholesome sense of duty. Yeah. So even from the beginning, I was like, why do people keep calling this character Tsundere? Because she seems so nice. Isn't the term dere? But to listen to you give your analysis where it's like her kind of unintentional bluntness just because she's not used to human interaction, combined with the fact that as an alpha, she's used to being in charge. It's like, oh yeah, I can see the Tsundere now. Because honestly, at first, I'm more used to the classic Tsunderes who will like call you Baka because of course they like you, but they're also exasperated by you. And I'm like, I never got the vibe that she was exasperated. I mean, she was, but like, I never really read her as a Tsundere until you kind of explained it. I was like, no, now I can kind of see it. Because I will say, like, kind of quote unquote devil's advocate, even though, yeah, as an alpha, she's used to basically being obeyed. And it's implied she even became alpha because she beat the last alpha in a fight and that she's a good fighter, etc., etc. There is a point where she says, even the weakest voices in the pack deserve to be heard. So I'm like, oh, she's supposed to be a fair and just leader, which doesn't surprise me. And I'm like, that means she does know how to take other people's thoughts into consideration. It just takes her a little while to get around to us. And also, this is more of a minor, not really plot hole necessarily, but just an undefined, unclear rule or line where obviously a lot of the comedy comes from her not quite understanding human customs because she's been a werewolf all her life. But it's repeatedly said that they send scouts to the village to get supplies, and they're friends with the witch, and because they're werewolves who can shapeshift at will, they can enter soft body form whenever they want. It's like, so how is it you know some things about humans but not others? Like, I feel like the line of knowledge between what she does and doesn't know is a bit shady, and I'm like, if you send human scouts to the village, even if you only did it, like, say, once a month, how do you know so much, or how do you not know that? Because there are a couple things where I'm like, okay, you
Kind of like how empowering.
like the clothing, for example, like when she says, "Are humans born with clothing?" I'm like, that I can understand because she's probably never seen a live birth before. But the fact that she's like, "Why are you embarrassed at seeing me naked?" I'm like, you said you sent scouts to the village. You never noticed that all the soft bodies had clothing on. Are you telling me you sent naked scouts to the village? I'm assuming you had the scouts put on clothing. So
yeah, what makes it weirder too is they most likely wear clothes too, or at least she did.
Exactly. I'm like, unless you sent your scouts naked to the village, which I'm assuming you didn't, so they probably had clothing somewhere so that when they walked to the village, they wouldn't waltz in the nude. So it's like, okay, you understand that clothing is a human tradition well enough to successfully send scouts to a village, but you don't understand why we might be embarrassed walking in on you when you're totally butt naked. But that's just me overanalyzing a tiny plot point that doesn't matter. But I'm always like, what is her line of knowledge here? Like, how much does she know and how much does she
It
not?
kind of reminds me like how in Power Rangers that as soon as they're able to morph into the Power Ranger, they know how to use all the weapons, how to fight, and how to pilot these giant robots that turn into a bigger robot. And like they never explain, like some of them are like, oh, it's
How they got that
some of them,
learning.
oh, it's magic or something like that. But like there's one where it's like it's just normal people, like a marine biologist. So it's literally a firefighter, a marine biologist, a rock climber, a biplane pilot, or a stunt plane pilot, and one who's kind of military, but is also super young and is training to be a nurse. Yet they know how to pilot like Megazords, which are just giant vehicles.
Should not be your area of expertise, but here
Yeah.
we go.
I mean, to be fair,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense why they got it because the theme is like it's called Lightspeed Rescue, so they get people who are experts in wrestling. But still, it's like there's you need a different license to drive a truck. But apparently, they've actually made jokes about that. There was a little kid who became a Power Ranger, and he's like, I could drive a Megazord, but I can't get my license. Which that was a car themed one, so he was also already driving. He already knew how to drive a car because it's you just don't question that shit, honestly.
I will say there's a brief example of that in Supergirl where Lena apparently hates flying and she's applied to be more of like the classic sciencey nerd, like the Angela type who's in chemistry and biology, but in season 4 she knows how to emergency land a plane that just got shot out of the sky. So I'm like, she hates flying and she's an expert in bio and chem, but she knows how to land a plane in an emergency. Okay. Where? When? But anyways, yeah. Same deal where it's like you don't question it.
Much better with
Because it was
was
like,
much better when they did that in Indiana Jones. The second Indiana Jones movie is a prequel, and him and his companions are stuck in a plane where the pilot just jumped out of it. And she's like, "Do you know how to like fly a plane?" And he's like, "No, do you?" And so the third movie, which takes place like 3 or 4 years after that one, he is able to fly a plane, and his dad asks him, like, "Do you know how to fly a plane?" He's like, "Fly? Yes. Land? No." So it makes sense that Indiana Jones will know how to fly a plane because he learned he needed to fly a plane. And it's funny too because the actor is a pretty good pilot in real life.
Oh, nice.
But yeah. Okay.
I think another thing too, just another brief with the alpha. Anytime they bring up hunting or weapons, it makes sense to me that she would not know the exact names. Like she doesn't know what a bow and arrow are. She doesn't know what a spear is, like in terms of names. But more that she is so skeptical of the human ability to hunt and survive, even though she's seen firsthand what a bow and arrow is and does, because she said she got shot at. So I'm like, I get it that maybe you're doubtful of your human because your human is currently unarmed, but she continuously makes reference to the theory that the entire human race is weak and she doesn't understand how we survived so long. It's like, but you almost got shot by a man with a bow and arrow. Even if you didn't know what it was called, you knew what it did and you knew what it could have done to you. So why is this a surprise to you? Because again, it's like also, even if you only sent your scouts to do like a grocery run so they don't necessarily interact with any townsfolk outside of the bare minimum necessary, I still feel like in some places there should be more human knowledge than there is that she displays. Or maybe you could argue that as the alpha, she herself never goes on these trips, and instead it is like maybe a lower member of the pack or something. But I don't know. It just sometimes I'm torn between how much they do or don't know. Because also like human expressions, that makes sense too. Because like if they just go in and out for a quick pick me up, it makes sense that maybe they wouldn't have been around long enough to hear someone's like, "Hey, keep your eyes peeled." But other stuff, I'm like, shouldn't you know that?
Like they go to pick up groceries and like they like the groceries.
Grocery run, midnight grocery run. You just see 4 wolves turning into humans as they run through the woods, and they're like, "Let's go to Kroger," and they just like slide through the grocery aisle, just filling up a cart, and they run back out to the pack like, "Got your stuff." And someone's like, "Oh, you forgot to buy this," and they're like, "Shit, I gotta go back." Because that's what I want to see. Because it's implied that the Countess sometimes makes trips to the village too, just to not necessarily to drink, but sometimes to literally just like chat with the people for company's sake. So I'm like, I really am interested to know like the level of human interaction each character has. Because I don't think Carmelina, Venus, the witch really ever go to town, but maybe they do. Because the witch made it sound like she used to. Because she was like, yeah, I would do this stuff with these people, but they would still treat me like a monster. So I'm like, okay, she probably used to visit town, but doesn't anymore. Venus, I don't think ever did. Or maybe she wouldn't go too deep in. I guess Carmelina did once, but it's not necessarily our village. It could have been one in Italy because it's that like meeting a vampire girl one. The Countess, like I said, confirmed that she would occasionally go to the village just to talk to people. And then obviously the Alpha sends scouts. So I'm like, I wonder how many times the people in the village have actually met these characters but didn't realize it. Well, because I guess Venus kind of once sort of went into town, if you remember that like erotic audio where it's like you are at like a party or whatever, and she kind of was like, hey, we should go walk in the forest later, and that's how it ends basically.
Time when you met her at the village's Starbucks.
Yes.
Which may or may not.
That's what I'm saying, a modernized version where, yeah, seriously, the werewolves are the people who you find in a grocery store at 3 in the goddamn morning, filling up their cart with stupid stuff. And they're like, yeah, just midnight grocery run. Don't worry. Don't judge us. Normal. Okay, fine.
Let me try this again. Kind of like another final thing I wanted to say. Like I talked about it a lot with like how the listener is, but that's kind of what I like about Dangerous' series. As like I said before, a lot of series, a lot of videos, or a lot of audios, the listener is basically just a piece of meat, and Dangerous really seems to enjoy having the listener go on the adventure. I'm basically going to be repeating myself, but I kind of want to take the time to praise Dangerous because, like I said, this is the cult of Dangerous ASMR podcast. If we don't praise her for 10 minutes at least every podcast, me and Boggle will cease to live. It's a little dramatic, but it's true. Um, so like we're talking about with the Witch one too, how the listener is very much like always talking back, and then even in the Countess one, like you escape, and so I think that's something really cool about Dangerous is I think it's something that's really cool about Dangerous' script. And like I said, there's other writers that do the FN. The listener in the Saved by the Giantess episode, you're like very important to like the plot and everything. I guess what I'm saying is to like writers of Dangerous ASMR, make the listener do stuff. I want to be cool too. Even if
Yeah, it's like because I think a lot of people, it's like wish fulfillment, so they make the listener self-insert, so it's a very blank slate, which default makes you a little more passive. And also, to be fair, we got a lot of like passive and subby people in the fandom. But yeah, to me, sometimes the biggest fun is not even necessarily being defiant, but being active. Like Steven said, where you're part of the adventure and not just some observer, where you're actually in the action doing stuff important rather than just experiencing it passively. Because I get it, like by nature of a role play, it's going to have a passive element because you can't do anything really. But when, yeah, you're like Dangerous and you try to still craft a personality for the listener, that does imply that they're doing stuff and not just taking it all, is really cool. Because I think Dangerous herself has said that before, where like it's not necessarily that she enjoys fighter characters, but to her, if you're kidnapped by Yandere in real life, although we like to joke in the comments, oh yes, I would let Dangerous kidnap me, no doubt. In real life, you'd probably be struggling to get out of there too, so she doesn't like characters who submit or fall in love too easily, because to her that doesn't feel realistic. I think that's part of the reason she makes her listener characters more feisty, is to her that's the realistic option, that no, you would not be that passive if you were actually in the situation, you'd fight back. Therefore, she makes listeners who are kind of that way. But again, like, it's everybody's preference, because I know some people do prefer the more passive listeners, because those people will get plenty of praise as well. So it's not us trying to diss on people who don't, who like prefer the more passive listeners.
let's do. Oh,
anyways,
no, you were about to do the thing I was gonna do. I'm gonna be less subtle though. Yeah, Todd, if you're listening, I don't want to just be comatose in the bed and just always fuck Lola. I want to do shit too. I want to call out Debbie and like push her over the boat, and then hopefully she dies forever.
He wants to defend his beloved Angela and throw Dev off the side of the boat. What a mood. Because I will say, like, I'm also going to call Game out for this too, even though we've talked about this, where because he and I have talked before about his Lamia's Coil series, and I did mention, I'm like, I personally prefer a listener who fights back when they're being dominated. But somebody who is more subby, like, for example, Net, prefers to be immediately submissive. And so I was like, Game, listen, no matter how you write your listener, you cannot please everyone. So do what you think is best. And he was like, well, to be honest, sometimes I don't know what I think is best. So he and I would, like, kind of talk about it. And part of the reason the most recent part of Coils turned out the way it did is because he sort of, like, this sounds really braggadocious, but he took my advice and had the listener have a little bit of an upper hand for a second. And I'm like, see, there we go. And that's not to say, oh, I'm totally responsible for any character development we see from here on out. But that was like an example where I said, hey, I personally would prefer a more active listener. And he delivered on it. But like I said, I'm like, dude, you'll also find plenty of people who prefer more passive. So it's all up to you guys, really.
Sorry, we kind of turned the end of this episode into the let's rant about how people treat the listeners, but just listening to this again and then like the Witch series, it kind of just made me realize that it's nice to have a listener. It's nice to have the listener be more active in the role, and
have some like personality to them, despite being mute.
So we're gonna end it there because we can go on forever, not only talking about this series, but we need to save our energy for next week because we will be covering the Dangerous ASMR crossover series, which doesn't have an official name. the crossover series. That's all we'll call it. Where not only do we have Dangerous bringing all these characters together, but we have the first appearance of a male voice in a Dangerous ASMR audio. I don't think we can handle it, Boggle, but I will tell you this. I still don't know how to end these fucking things. Just end it quick and just hope nobody's listening anymore. Okay, I'm Steven. Boggle, say bye. Boggle doesn't even want to say goodbye. All right.
I said bye.
I didn't hear you. Okay, podcast over. Bye.
Oh.